Hi, everyone, and welcome back to part 4 of our Unit 8 note packet. And so, part 1, 2, 3, they were all pretty much the same. We were trying to find area and perimeter of different two-dimensional shapes. Part 1 was all about triangles and rectangles. Part 2 was all about parallelograms, rhombi, and squares. And then finally, part 3 was all about trapezoids and kites. And a lot of the things we did were similar between the shapes. And remember, one of the biggest components was remembering old skills that we had to apply in these new situations to maybe find a missing side length or find that height or find that base so we could plug those numbers in to what our area formula is going to be. Now, today is going to be no different than that, but obviously you can see we're moving on to a different shape. We're going to start talking circles today. And circles can be nice. There's, a little bit less that goes on, right? There's no straight sides in a circle. And so, whereas we will pull from old skills quite a bit still in circles, it's not going to be quite the variety that some of those other shapes, the routes they took you down and stuff like that. There's a couple things that we'll have to remember for almost every circle problem. And then beyond that, it's about applying those things that, we're looking for and understanding. So without further ado, let's just get to it. And let's just write down the area formula right off the bat. So circular area formula, area is going to equal pi times r squared. Pi r squared. Now remember, r stands for your radius. And what your radius is a line coming from the center of the circle and hitting the edge of the circle. That's always your radius. And so really that's the only thing you need in this equation, right? Pi is 3.14. Square isn't something we plug in. And so for you to find the area of the circle, all you need to do is figure out what is the radius. And then we plug it into pi r squared. Now, one thing to remind yourself, and to be, this is kind of where some old information comes back in the circle unit, is you're not always given the radius. Many times you have to think through the diameter first. And the diameter does not go into this equation. It has to be the radius. So the one thing I really want you to remember and think about is that your diameter is twice as big as the radius, right? And so if we have the diameter, we have to divide by 2 to get our radius. And that's going to be, something that comes up quite a bit in circles. Now, here we go. Let's just do some problems. It says find the area of each circle in terms of pi. What that means is our final answer is going to have a pi in it. We're not actually going to type pi into our calculator in these situations. We're just going to leave the pi in our final answer. That way we don't have to round anything. And so by keeping it in terms of pi, what it's allowing us to do is give an exact answer. That means just it's an answer that has not been rounded at all. So it is exactly what it is supposed to be. And so I want to show you how that works. Now, nice thing in this problem, 15 is our radius, right? That's a line coming from the center to the edge of the circle. So we know r right off the bat. And so if area is pi r squared, then the area of this circle is pi times 15 squared. Now, I really want you to think about the words I'm using as I wrote that down. Pi times 15 squared. And the reason I want you to think about that is we're now going to put our answer into terms of pi. It's going to be an exact answer. And we really want to follow order of operations to make this happen. So again, it's pi times 15 squared. And you guys know that in order of operations, we are going to handle exponents before we are going to handle multiplication. So we need to square this 15 first before we even think about the pi. And so 15 to the second power is 225. And so this is going to equal pi times 225. Now, if we wanted a decimal answer, we could just type that into our calculator and it'd give us a decimal. But we don't want that. We just want it in terms of pi. And in fact, we are actually done then because we don't want to actually times by pi. And then there's nothing else to do with the 225. Now, we will write it in a different order. We are going to call this 225 pi. But then that's your final answer, except for the fact that we need to write centimeters squared because these are still area problems. But that's how you keep it in terms of pi. You literally just leave the pi there. Don't do anything with the pi and simplify the rest of it as far as you can. All right, so let's do that again. But there's a problem here in number 2. In number 2, we know the diameter. That line's going all the way across the circle. And so if our diameter is 44, and remember, diameter twice as big as radius, we need to divide that by 2 to get the radius. So our radius is going to be 22 then, right? And so the whole thing is 44. What that's telling us is half of it is 22, the other half, right, is 22. Because both halves are radiuses, and then put together is 44. Now, remember, in pi r squared, we need the radius. So we don't care about the 44 anymore. We want to work with the 22. And so our area is going to equal pi and then times 22 squared. And remember, we want to leave it in terms of pi. And so all we're going to do is square the 22 and then write it in front of pi. So 22 squared is 484. So this is like pi times 484. And just remember, we're now going to write that in front of the pi. And so our final answer is 484 pi. Feet are the units, so feet squared. All right. And so that's what it's like to work with a circle. Our next couple examples will just have us round to the nearest tenth. So now we're actually going to type that pi into our calculator. So here we go. Now we're still finding the area. It's still pi r squared, right? And so in this first example, boom, that's nice. We have our radius. And so our area is just pi times 7.5 squared. And so what we want to do is just go to our calculator and type that in. So let's do it. And so I'm going to hit second and the pi button. It's in blue above this triangle exponent button. It'll put a pi up there. And then I'll just type in what I've got, 7.5 in parentheses, and then squared. When I hit enter, that's my area. So the area of this circle is 176.7. So 176.7. And again, units, so inches squared. Inches squared. All right, one more problem real quick. This one, same deal as the last one, but again, just like before, this time we know our diameter. Our diameter is 3.8. Our radius is half that, so let's divide it in 2. 3.8 divided by 2 is 1.9. So we want to work with the 1.9. And so our area will be pi, and then times our radius, which is 1.9 squared. And then again, we'll just type all that into our calculator. Let's get it so we can see it. Perfect. So second pi, parentheses 1.9 squared. Enter. Perfect. 11.3. So the area of this circle is 11.3. Again, units, so feet squared. And there we go. All right. So far, so good. I personally really like working with circles. I think they just make a lot of sense, right? So here we go. Let's start working backwards now. Now they want us to find the radius if we know the area. So we need to work backwards here. We need to figure out the radius instead of plugging the radius in, right? And so here's how it's going to look. Let's say we have this circle, and our radius is this, and we don't know what it is, so we'll just say r. But we know the whole area is 24. Well, remember, our area equation equals pi times r squared. And if we know area, we can plug 24 in for the a. And so 24 will equal pi r squared. And so now we just have to algebraically solve this for r. And so for me to solve for r, I want to get r squared by itself. And then I take the square root. And so I need to divide both sides by pi right now. I need to divide both sides by pi. And then my pi's will cancel. And on the right, it'll leave me with r squared. But on the left, I need to just type 24 divided by pi into my calculator. 24 divided by pi. And I get 7.6. So r squared is 7.6. So then for me to get r, I don't want r squared, right? So I need to take the square root here. And so r will be whatever the square root of 7.6 is. Let's go back to our calculator. Let's talk about calculator things real quick and about how not to round. So square root, I'll hit second and the squared button, and it'll give me the square root thing. And if I just hit up one time, I highlight my 7.6, except for I'm highlighting all of it. So I'm not just rounding it to 7.6 yet. If I hit enter, it'll put that thing under my square root. And then it'll take the square root of the whole thing when I hit enter again. And now there's my mostly exact answer. And I can round that one up to 2.8. And so now I know the radius is 2.8. Now, we see the units are inches, so I can squeeze inches in there. 2.8 inches, right? Perfect. Let's do that again. This time we want to find the diameter. So we have to work through the radius first, and then remember, diameter is twice as big as the radius. So once we get our radius, we'll just times it by 2. So again, area of a circle is pi r squared. And I know the area, right, is 6 pi, so I can plug 6 pi in for A. And so when I do that, I am given 6 pi equals pi r squared. And so remember, we need r again. So to get r by itself, we first have to get r squared by itself. So again, the first step is divide both sides by pi. And this is a nice step because on our right, when we divide by pi, the pi's cancel out, right? But on the left, there's a pi up top and in the bottom now too. And so those pi's cancel out. And it just leaves us with 6 on the left and r squared on the right. And so now for us to get r, we just square root both sides. And my radius is whatever the square root of 6 is. Go back to my calculator. Second, square root, we'll put a 6 under there. Enter. And it looks roughly 2.4. 2.4. Now remember, they're asking about the diameter. So my radius is 2.4. So that means, my diameter equals 2.4 times 2, right? Because it's twice as big. And so that's going to give us 4.8. And meters are our unit. So my diameter is 4.8 meters. Remember, we get that just because we solved for the radius first. They wanted us to find diameter. So we had to multiply it by 2 because diameter is twice as big. All right, so we don't have too many problems left. We're definitely going to get this one done in 2 videos. Let's try to introduce what a sector is real quick. Let's try to introduce what a sector is. So a sector is like a slice of pie or a slice of pizza. It's basically just part of the circle, right? And so if I put my center of the circle here and I connect from it a couple radiuses, this right here, that's what a sector is. That's what a sector is. It's just part of the circle. And so we need to try to figure out how can we find the area of part of the circle. The area of the whole circle is pi r squared. How can we figure out the area of part of a circle? And this brings us back to some older skills that we introduced last unit in Unit 7. And we need to remember a little bit about central angles and stuff like that from Unit 7. So here we go for sector area formula. Actually, you know what? Let's get to that in the next video. I'm running out of time here. So thank you for your hard work. I will talk to you in 1 second.